A few months ago, I designed and made this record console for my living room. Kind of a mid-century modern inspired design. It's 3/4-inch plywood put together with basic dado construction and painted. And now I have a bunch of board games and puzzles and cards, and I need a place to keep them. What I'm aiming to make is something similar to the record console, but a little smaller to fit in this space and with a different shelf structure. Let's see what happens. Alright, I got a piece of 4x8 plywood cut into quarters. I have a cut list with measurements that probably add up, so we're ready to start. The first step is cutting all the pieces to size. Without a table saw, I'm just running a jigsaw along a straight edge, which usually works pretty well. I need a top, bottom, 2 sides, center shelf, and 2 dividers. The shelf and dividers aren't quite as deep as the top, bottom, and sides, so when it's assembled, they'll be set in a little, allowing the back to sit flush in a rabbet. There was one edge on the top that went way off the rails, so I ran back over it with a router to get it straight and square. I'll spare you the play-by-play, so just imagine this all happening over and over. Once things are broken down, they'll be cut to their final length on the miter saw. With all of those cut, I'll make the dados. I have this homemade dado jig, which is very handy. There are tons of videos on how to make these. I won't do that now, but how it works is it has 2 guides, one fixed and one movable, which are attached to thin bases. When the router runs along a guide, the bit cuts exactly to the edge of that base. So you just need to position the jig on your workpiece, put in a piece of whatever will be going into the dado, adjust it to that, and run your router through it. And you end up with a perfectly sized dado with no measuring, no sneaking up or readjusting. Now it's just lather, rinse, repeat until all 10 dados are cut. Once those are done, I'll do a dry assembly to make sure everything fits. To my pleasant surprise, it all easily slotted together. The only issue was that this side was a little wide at the top, so it stuck out the back. Probably a symptom of making these cuts with a jigsaw. So I'll just trim that down a touch with the router. Then I can assemble it all permanently with glue. The nice thing about these dados is that everything is self-aligning, so putting it together is really easy. I'll still put some clamps on to ensure all the pieces stay in the right place and have a good, solid glue bond. Nice. When the glue is dry, I'll route the rabbet for the back. I'm doing it in a couple shallow passes to hopefully avoid pieces tearing out. I should have had an additional piece clamped on along the edges to give a little more support for the router, but I guess it wasn't too precarious. All went fine except for this unfortunate blowout. It's at the back, so a little wood filler and paint, and it will never be seen. Using a chisel, I'll get the rounded rabbet corners somewhat square. Then I'll go around the top and give it a small round over. All the other edges get softened with a quick sanding. Each end has a 3/4 inch lip sticking out on the top and bottom, so it's just a matter of cutting down pieces of pine 1x2s so they fit nice and snug in the space. Then they get glued in place and clamped. A quick sanding on those edges, and we're ready for paint. I thought the paint swatch I picked out was sort of a retro muted yellow, but this is looking more like something in the vivid mustard direction. Using a small roller, I'm going to apply a couple coats to get a nice even color all the way around. This foam roller is really useful for getting into all the corners as well. I'm not really a painter, but eventually I got things decently covered. The biggest change I would make is my plywood selection. My record console was made with birch plywood, and this is some unnamed stuff that was $20 cheaper. Definitely not worth saving a few bucks for. The veneer is really thin and very easily chipped and split. The softwood made it harder to get nice clean edges in a lot of places, so it still looks like plywood edge even with paint on top. I'm not broken up about it because this is just for me, but do not recommend skimping on the plywood quality. With everything painted, I'll mark where I want the legs, drill pilot holes, and screw them in. These are 4-inch angled metal legs. Then I'll measure for the back and cut a piece of 1/8-inch hardboard to size. After a few test fits, it gets nailed in place. And this shelf is done. I like the way this turned out. Yeah, the yellow is a little brighter than what I was envisioning, but I think it's kind of fun. It's nothing elaborate, but the vertical slats on the sides came out looking good, and overall I'd say the proportions work pretty well. It's a good fit for the room, and it makes it easy to see and access all the games. Thanks for watching.